Well, no prizes for guessing where I am this week. Washington, D.C. And, of course, the White House behind me. Trump's apparently just left to go on this European tour to NATO and to Britain and then on to meet Vladimir Putin. And I'm in Washington to do filming for the movie Renegade, a story about my life and work that's now in progress. And I just taken a few minutes out to remind myself of some of the sights. I've been in Washington a few times. And what we're looking at now, not least in America, but wider afield, is the blatant and ever more extreme divisions among people in terms of politics. So you've got very clear divisions in this country between those that support Trump and those who seriously oppose Trump. And the point I've been making all these years is that it's all an illusion. There might seem to be differences on the surface in terms of rhetoric and emphasis and the way things are approached. But in the background, there is this always there permanent government controlled through the military, through the intelligence networks, through the hidden hand behind all of it. And people are getting pulled in to this illusion that we live in a world of political choice when actually it's a one-party state masquerading as political choice. And the way the divisions have been manipulated in the United States is a classic. First of all, you've got Trump, who's portrayed as the far-right, quote, Nazi, fascistic president. And then on the other side, you've got the so-called progressive mentality, which is not liberal in my view, very much the opposite of liberal. But you've got this so-called progressive mentality that claims to be anti-fascist and therefore anti-Trump. And so you've got this massive division, which is, as I've been pointing out in the books and talks all these years, is exactly what this hidden hand wants. It wants to set society at war with itself. And very clearly that is happening ever more obviously in the United States. And of course, this week, when Trump is in London, well, not necessarily in London very much, but in Britain, there will be big protests, no doubt, against Trump's visit. Because the progressive mentality has moved in Britain and other European countries as well that came out of America. And it's this progressive mentality that has hijacked the traditional, truly liberal left. And because it's not liberal but claims to be anti-fascist, we have this extraordinary situation where people are attacking Trump for being far right and fascistic, and yet the progressive mentality that claims to be the opposite of Trump goes about its business in the same way that fascistic tyrannies operate. It is this progressive mentality that claims such self-purity that is the driving force behind political correctness, which is the imposition, increasingly more in an ever more extreme way, the imposition of certain opinions on everyone else to the point where no other opinion is allowed, otherwise you are a Nazi, a bigot, and must be silenced. So we're seeing the book-burning mentality of the Nazis in Germany being expressed more and more through people who claim to be liberal, who claim to be anti-fascist. So big internet corporations like Facebook and Google also express this progressive mentality, and in doing so justify the deletion from Facebook, from Google, from Google-owned YouTube, opinions that are different to this increasingly progressive, I say regressive, imposed norm. And if you want to know what the agenda is for the world, it's very simple. Look at what you are not allowed to have an opinion about without being censored or without being abused. Because, ironically, behind this so-called liberal mentality, which is not the progressives, are the very corporations and billionaire networks that, when I was growing up, the truly liberal left were opposing, were exposing. People went on marches demanding freedom of speech. Now the progressive mentality goes on protest demanding that freedom of speech is denied those that have a different opinion. We have the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Google search engines targeting other people's opinions in ways that the truly liberal left of the past would have been right at the front in challenging. But instead, the progressive mentality that's hijacked the traditional liberal left is now cheering them on. And so we have this black or white situation where you're for us or you're against us. No shades of grey, on the basis of, in this country, I love Trump or I hate Trump. And yet, Trump in the White House is just another puppet, just another here today, gone tomorrow puppet. There'll be someone along to replace him, as he replaced Obama, as Obama replaced Bush, and so on. And in the background, this permanent government, this hidden hand that works through the military and the intelligence agencies and these other institutions of power that are always here while the president comes and goes, they are running their agenda and advancing it while the people go to war with themselves over the puppet, the latest puppet in the frickin' White House. And the same, like I say, will be happening this week in Britain with Trump's visit. And all the time that this focus of attention is on I love Trump, I hate Trump, over the other side of the United States, where I'll be going in a few days, is Silicon Valley, where the very end of humanity is being planned and advanced through the means of connecting the human brain mind to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. All this is going on while people are manipulated to have this focus of attention. I love Trump, I hate Trump. It's no accident that the so-called godfather, funder of the progressive alleged left is George Soros, a billionaire who has a network called the Open Society Foundation Network, which so far he has infused with $32 billion. That is not giving a few dollars to charity to help, put a few dollars in the coffers of left-wing organizations or progressive organizations. That is a colossal funding which is creating a network, has created a network, both in this country and in Europe, to fund this progressive mentality to do what it's doing in terms of denying freedom of speech and pushing this agenda that ultimately the people behind it are those that control and run the very corporations and the very financial global networks that the traditional left used to challenge. But the progressive left is now funded by, in the form of people like Soros. And while he's the godfather of the left, the progressive left, Soros, the biggest funder of Donald Trump has been Sheldon Adelson, another billionaire, media and casino magnate. And so you've got two people who I would say myself, after nearly 30 years of research, are actually ultimately controlled by the same force, who are major, massive, fundamental players in terms of Adelson on the right, not least there in the White House with Trump. And on the left, you've got this other one, George Soros, now infamous George Soros, anyone wants to do any research into his activities, who is driving the agenda of the left, the progressive left. So you've got two sides, as they are perceived, being played off against each other by the same force. Sheldon Adelson, for instance, is an ultra Zionist and associate of Benjamin Netanyahu. It was Adelson that led Trump to move the US embassy to Jerusalem out of Tel Aviv. It was that that force in the background, personified by Adelson, that led Trump to ditch the Iran nuclear deal because Israel didn't want it. And so you have this hidden hand and all its billions and more that are manipulating the so-called right and manipulating the so-called left. And what they want basically is civil war between the two, and also to get the two, quote, sides to so focus on each other that they miss what's going on in the background behind the curtain that this is there to cover. And everything is black and white. Facts don't matter. We're in a post-fact world. Facts don't matter. You can produce facts to support what you're saying. Doesn't matter if it doesn't go with what the progressive, fascistic, illusory left want. Then facts don't matter. And I'll give you a great example: immigration. The whole story of immigration and since the Trump administration came to power, and the way that we've had the pictures of children in cages and parted from their families, has been used massively in recent times to increase this division between people. But when you look at it from a factual point of view, what you are looking at is a post-fact world in which black is black and white is white, and no shades of grey are ever looked at. First of all, during the Obama administration, the hero of this progressive mentality, children were parted from their parents at the border and were kept in this cage-like situation. Some of the pictures that were circulating on the internet at the height of this recently, who were saying, look, Trump, what he's doing, they were actually pictures taken in 2014 when Obama was in this place. And of course, let's get through the black and white and let's look at some shades of grey. Is it wrong to part children from their parents at the border? Are you kidding? It's absolutely outrageous. And his administration shouldn't have done it, and Obama's administration shouldn't have done it. But on one side, now, this progressive mentality at its most extreme, which expresses itself through the Democratic Party in this country, they're talking about opening the borders, letting everyone in, that giving massive amnesties to people who've entered this country illegally, which will do what? It will give the go-ahead to people on the other side of the Mexican border to think, well, let's all head for the United States because nothing's going to happen. We're going to get in. It's going to be fine. And that means more children being brought into the situations that the progressive left says it doesn't like, and quite rightly. And if you have open borders, what do you think? What does anyone think is going to happen to the United States? Who is going to produce the money that will be necessary for all the people coming in without any blocks on it? What about all the people in America now, of all different backgrounds, colours and races? What's going to happen to them? There's a myth about America, which the American authorities try to sell you, that it's this big, rich, powerful country. Well, it is very rich, but only in the hands of a remarkably few people. There is vast poverty in this country. There are tent cities. There's people sleeping in the street. There's millions and millions and millions that can't get a job. And how is their situation going to be improved in any way by having vast numbers of people enter this country looking for the same jobs and the same sources of income, government or otherwise? What do they think is going to happen? You see, what you've got in this post-fact society is a progressive left which on one side says let everybody in, not just here but in Europe and other countries, but on the other says it's terrible that people are homeless. In Britain, they're saying, well, we want more spent on the National Health Service. There's not enough homes, not enough jobs. Well, what does anyone think will happen to job possibilities and home possibilities and all the rest of it, if more and more people are allowed to pour into the country? None of this is considered because facts are irrelevant. And of course, where people are fleeing wars, genuinely, they should be helped. Of course they should. And children shouldn't be parted from their parents at the border or anywhere else. But the idea that you can have this endless flow of people, and on the extreme, like I say, they want no borders, coming into a land, and there to be no consequences for the rest of the population? It's madness. But then this progressive mentality is a form of madness in my view. And it's taken over the college campuses. It's taken over the airways through media operations in America like CNN and MSNBC. And it's increasingly taking over, around the world, the norms of government. Any world in which you can't have a different opinion to someone else because the someone else says you can't is by any definition a tyranny, a fascistic tyranny. And that is what we have been manipulated into. And getting Trump in the White House was perfect for this hidden hand in this regard, because here is a figure that can be used to, as a dividing force, and therefore make the divisions between so-called left and right even more massive than they were before. It's all manipulated. And I'll say this, if there's anyone watching this who doesn't believe in the free flow of opinion and the free flow of information, whether we agree with it or not. I certainly don't agree with the vast majority of what this guy does. Then don't tell me you're a liberal. Look up the opposite definition to a liberal and you'll be much closer to your mentality. And just down from here is the place where Martin Luther King made his famous and fantastic I Have a Dream speech in August 1963. And it's worth going back there for just a little ponder on what Martin Luther King might have made of the progressive mentality that today claims to be the liberal left. So this is the massive memorial to Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. And in 1963, all this area was packed with hundreds of thousands of people on the March for Freedom, the March for Jobs, in which culminated with Martin Luther King standing up and making that I Have a Dream speech, which I can never hear without tears come to my eyes. And a march for jobs. Well, the progressive left that wants open borders or a massive amount of immigration into countries, people of different cultures, which is obviously gets itself into even greater challenges in society coming together. And yet, who benefits from this mass uncontrolled immigration that some of these people want? The corporations. The corporations, because they get cheap labor. Because what happens when you've got a massive amount of people chasing fewer and fewer jobs is the corporations can say, well, if you won't do it for this, someone over there will. And so this claim by the progressive mindset to represent poor people, to represent the working class, as it's called, is just a myth. It's nothing to do with that. It's advancing an agenda that is creating mayhem and chaos. Why? Because although most of them won't realise they're being played like a violin, it's because that's what it's meant to do. Well, on my way down to the Lincoln building, there is this war memorial. And in my view, given American military history, a rather ironic set of words. It says, Americans came to liberate and not to conquer, to restore freedom and to end tyranny. Well, when you look, like I said, American military history, and all the wars of conquest and all the wars to remove regimes in other countries that they don't want, that is absolutely not what the American military has been doing for most of its existence. And coming back to this point about the one-party state where left and right think that they're different. If you look at that American military conquesting history, you see it happened under Republican administrations and it happened under Democrat administrations. And one of the things that was really clear was that during the Boy George Bush administration, there was a big anti-war movement started to emerge in America because of these invasions of Iraq and this warlike mentality. But when Obama came in, again the hero of the progressive mind, he did not have one day in office when America was not at war with someone. What happened to the anti-war movement in the Bush time? It disappeared. It disappeared because of this same mentality that I'm talking about. This us and them, black and white mentality. Either something is right or it's not right, or you believe it not to be right, or you believe it to be right. It doesn't become right, the same behavior, the same agenda, the same happenings, just because it's a Democratic president. If it's wrong to invade countries, which it is, then it's wrong whoever orders that to happen. But no, in this one-party state, when one person does it, that's okay. When the other person does it, that's not okay. Well, I say that mentality is not okay. We have to start looking at actions and not judging them differently because of the people and their political persuasion who took those actions. Otherwise, the word hypocrisy comes into view. And so it should, over and over again, within the subject I'm talking about. So this is Abraham Lincoln, who of course was US President during the American Civil War. And we certainly don't want another one, thank you, on the basis of progressive being played off against right. And there's another interesting facet to this image of Lincoln. On either side, the arms of the chair, if you like, is the fascist symbol used by the Italian fascists of Mussolini. Goes back to the Roman Empire, and it represents control with the rods being tied together, usually with an axe head on the top. And if you go around Washington, you'll see the fascist symbol in many places, and even behind the Speaker's chair in the House of Representatives. Go on the internet and have a look at an image find, and you'll see the fascist symbol either side of the Speaker's chair in the House of Representatives. All these little hand touches that most people miss. This is the place where Martin Luther King looked out on August 28th, 1963, to hundreds of thousands of people on the march to Washington for jobs and freedom. And his stunning speech, "I Have a Dream." I wonder what he'd think today. It's so appropriate that Martin Luther King made that speech at this spot, because it was in this period of Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War that the scourge, the stunning inhumanity of slavery started to come to an end. But let us not forget that while slavery became unlawful, segregation between black and white, apartheid, was going on into the 1960s. I was around 12 years old before segregation ended. And black people did not have to go to different toilets, different this, different that, to white people. Just like people remember in South Africa, but many people around the world forget how relatively recent it was in the land of the free, as it likes to believe itself to be. And there is still, of course, massive discrimination against what are today called people of color and other minorities. But you don't delete racism by reversing it. And that is not what Martin Luther King was talking about. He said in this I Have a Dream speech, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And he talked about all people being created equal. People judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. What a wonderful thought. Maybe the progressives, particularly on the extreme, might ponder on that, and that freedom and justice is to look at people on the basis of their behavior, not on the color of their skin. Because what we're seeing now is increasingly a reverse version of racism, in which this minority or that group can't be criticized because of political correctness. You can't say that. No matter what they do, you can't say that. But the group known as white people, anything can now be said about them, and there's no political correct defense or block to that. Say what you like. Now, racism is judging people by the nature of their race. It's pretty bloody obvious and straightforward. What is judging white people as a group instead of individual behaviour except racism? But the progressive mentality can't see that because it's too far up its own backside, too awash, too drowning in its own sense of self-purity. For me, what King said at this spot is exactly the way forward, where we judge everyone, black, white, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, by their behaviour and not by the colour of their skin. And he went on to say, when he was talking about speeding up the time, when all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. And no one's going to be free until we set each other free. Free to have opinions that we don't like, or don't agree with, and free not to be judged, no matter what the nature of their racial type. Another illusion. The freedom not to be judged by the colour of skin, no matter what it is, but to be perceived by the nature of what we do, what we say, and what comes from here. And if we come back to that question of what would Martin Luther King have thought about what is happening in America now, what is happening in Europe now, this divide and rule, this reverse racism, just my opinion, I reckon he'd probably weep.